Hi, it's Kim. Today I wanted to do another art-related video since I've recently gotten back into my long-time hobby of drawing and painting. I took an extremely long break where I didn't touch my paints for over a year now, and in this video I'll be introducing my entire minimalist art supplies collections. I say minimalist because I've seen other videos where people have entire rooms dedicated to just art supplies, but as a hobbyist, I think what I have would fit in a normal shoebox. With the kind of mediums that I prefer to use, I mainly do watercolor, but the gouache was a recent new addition. Also, I've been doing a bit of digital drawings more frequently, so that is also contributed to my lack of use in the traditional art supplies. I'll go over the supplies and give a very brief opinion or review on them, and also explain what kind of supplies that you should buy if you're curious on how to build up your own collection as well. Video will be broken down into three main parts. So that would be the paint, and then the paper, and then the brushes. Obviously, there's going to be other categories such as pencils or I don't know, erasers, but I'm just not going to include them because I just used regular HB pencils and just a normal eraser. I don't put too much into that, and I was considering on whether iPad would belong in this video. Technically speaking, yes, but I will not actually talk about it because I think it's out of the scope for this particular introduction to the supplies. Anyways, let's get on with the video. So these are all the watercolor and gouache paint sets that I currently have, and we will go through them one by one. We'll start with the watercolors. When it comes to watercolors, I used to have more cheaper watercolor sets, but recently I've just decided to simplify and become more of a minimalist by only going for more of the quality watercolor sets. These are the Daniel Smith extra fine watercolor set, like the primary colors set where you can buy packs of 6. These are the colors from the Daniel Smith Alvaro Master set where there was a further 12 colors. I'll just lay them all out so you can have a look, and I'll show you the palette. So these are all the colors laid out. This is the main watercolor set where I'm starting to run out of space to fill in the pans. This is what it looks like all laid out. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the watercolor purchases because if the paints are really bad, then it's really hard to work with, especially for beginners. 12 of those colors, which were from the set that I later bought, I actually did not use quite a few of them because it overlapped with the time where I stopped using traditional mediums and slowly stopped drawing and painting altogether. So this is the first set of paints. If you are willing to invest more into quality paints and are sick of using really cheap watercolors, then going for this primary set is a pretty good idea because it has all 3 primary colors but one warm and one cool tone of each red, each yellow, and blue. And there's white gouache, but that one is kind of optional. This is the gouache palette now, and the gouache was from a more rebellious phase in my life where I thought, why not gouache? Because I was so frustrated with watercolor because watercolor is not great for when you make mistakes. It's hard to cover it up and you have to keep working on layers, and I am an impatient type. I decided to try gouache. So this is a smaller selection of colors, and these are all Winsor & Newton designers gouache set that I have filled into the pan. So far, I've actually really enjoyed the gouache. This set, once it dries, you can re-wet it and use it again, but it depends on the brand or the type of gouache, where there are some brands where once it dries out, you cannot put water on it and then work it again. So this one, you're able to do that, so that's why I ended up going for it. But as you can see, it is cracking, and that is indicative of the different kind of materials that are used than watercolors. And this is how it is laid out. I don't know if I changed the ordering, and these are spare pans for the palette that I just left it in here in case I get more paint. I guess my oldest paint set is this Kansai Tambi set that I bought online, and there's a lot of paint. The texture is different from the traditional like watercolors that was mentioned before, because the way it dries, you can see that it doesn't crack but kind of like shrinks up on itself. If you add water, like there is no issue and it works just fine. This watercolors are not used for details, but the colors are very vibrant and they are the more affordable version for people who are also interested in trying these out. Amongst the three main categories, if you are on a tight budget and still want affordable materials for your painting journey, then paper is one category that splurging a bit is worth it. So when it comes to paints, there is going to be many like decent options at good prices, and the same goes for brushes. But when it comes to paper, spending a bit more on it really makes a difference. I do have like a few different types of paper, and we will go through them. This is the watercolor paper that I use the most. You can also use this for gouache as well, but it's Fabriano cold pressed 300 GSM and 100% cotton. Because the cost of paper can add up, if you're like, since you need paper for like all the watercolors, it's much more affordable to buy like an A1 sheet at a time and cut it up rather than going for one of the pre-bound sketchbooks. Sometimes I do buy the pads when it's on sale. This is the cold press, which is like kind of the medium texture, but I also like ended up trying out the hot press, so the texture is, there's a difference in texture and it's much more smooth. And once you're more used to watercolor painting and want to try out different textures, then you can start on the cold pressed and then see if you enjoy the hot pressed as well. So this is like the exact same paper except the hot press versions. I also have watercolor sketchbook as well, because I enjoy like having all my paintings or sketches together. So this is the Winsor & Newton like watercolor sketchbook, and it's also 300 GSM and 100% cotton. And I think with these sketchbooks, I only buy them when it's on sale, but these are also like quite nice. And the texture, I think, is hot pressed because it is not as textured. The paper does hold up pretty well, and there is limited buckling. I used maybe half of it, and I do think it is worth going for a watercolor sketchbook if you are into sketchbooks. One downside is that the binding, which is not spiral bound or anything like that, you do need to break the spine a bit to like keep it open and on a flat surface, because otherwise it will try to close up. Once I swapped to like the slightly more expensive papers, these are like the more expensive paper, but there's some pad paper still left here. And this paper that I used to use is significantly cheaper. So when it comes to paper with watercolor, and as I mentioned before, good paper makes the painting experience much more easier. So it makes the colors look nicer and smoother, and it's easier to work with as well. If you make a mistake, the better papers give you somewhat of a chance to fix that mistake and just makes the painting look much better. But then the poor papers, you might have the paint slide around or make the layering much more difficult. And for beginners, I think it can work against you, because I mean, some of it could be your skills, but some of it is the materials that you work with, and you do need to have some quality of paper to help you enjoy the process. Now onto the brushes. These are all the brushes I have, and there are 4 different brands, so I will just categorize them and then get back to this. These are all the brushes in their respective sets. Some of them have been wrecked because of use, others have been lost, and obviously this brush did come with its own set, but now it's alone. This is the oldest brush that's remaining actually. I bought it from Daiso actually, and it is one of my favorite watercolor brushes still. So the Daiso Japan has a set of watercolor brushes, and for the price, it is really good. With brushes, you can definitely like go for some of the more affordable brushes, because after a year of use, you do kind of need to replace them anyways and need to keep buying new brushes, although it could be just the way I'm using it that wrecks the brushes. But I haven't been able to go back to Japan for a while now, so this is the only one that's left, and I will purchase more. Maybe I can find some online. This is the Reeves brushes, and I find them to be alright, and this round number 6 is the one that I use the most because it's a nice size, and the tip is quite pointed, and I have used it quite a bit. I have gotten good use out of it, and I do like round tipped brushes that are not too thin, that are pointed at the end. These are, I don't think they're quite my favorite, but I bought them while I was in Korea a couple years ago now. I don't really have too much to say on it. Orange set I've also bought in Korea, and I think they're pretty similar actually, but I like this set slightly better because I think the tips are a bit more pointed than this set here. This is a good size. The tip is quite alright, and they're also affordable. So this brand is Rubens watercolor series. Out of the 4, I still like the Daiso brushes better, but then this set is also quite alright. But I think the set is quite large, and they have like the larger brushes, but I don't use the larger ones as much. Anyways, so that was pretty much my whole art supplies collection. I'm not gonna go through the pencils and pens because I used normal regular ballpoint pens or gel pens and stuff like that, but these were like the main art supplies. And with the iPad, which does fall into this category, I think I can do a separate one for that. Digital art was not talked about in this video either. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. So, bye!